We are honored today to have as our guest a woman, I guess I shouldn't say whichever sex it is, but an officer who really, quite honestly, I was looking at your record, and you probably have saved a lot of lives. And you've certainly diffused a lot of situations that could become much more serious. So we're honored to have you with us. We welcome to another edition of Odyssey House Journals. I'm Randall Carlisle, your host, Nicole Slack, my co-host. And our guest today is Unified Police Mental Health Detective. Did I get all that right?
Yes.
Okay. Tracy Crino.
Yes.
Okay. I got it all right.
Good job.
This aging brain of mine is hard. Tracy was recently honored as Police Officer of the Year in Mill Creek. And for those of you watching in America and around the country, Mill Creek is a suburb of Salt Lake City, and she works with the Unified Police Department, which has jurisdiction over that suburb. So tell us what you do and why you were honored. Was I right in saying, you respond to mental health crises and try to diffuse the situation. So you either may or may not save lives, but you go out on those calls, right?
Yes, I do.
What determines whether they call you and say, Tracy, we need your help here?
So I respond on any ongoing mental health crisis. So someone that could be diagnosed with a substance use disorder, a diagnosed mental health disorder like schizophrenia, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. I also respond on older adults that have dementia and Alzheimer's, that have tendencies to maybe walk away or have some combative behaviors due to their aging and with the Alzheimer's and dementia diagnosis.
And those are some of the situations that can be the most dangerous for police officers, especially the mental health issue, substance use issue, right?
Yes.
What do you, we have trouble here at Odyssey when somebody comes in and they have been using meth for a long time, and they may have a psychosis from the meth, or they may have a deeper-seated mental health problem. What do you do when you go out, say somebody is going through a psychotic episode, like either with a weapon or not, or barricading themselves in a home? How do you handle that?
So first and foremost, obviously, officer safety and public safety is number one. When we're responding on those, a lot of the officers look to me of having knowledge and background of those individuals. Like, what are the risks? What are their issues? Is it just mental health? Is it substance use? And so we assess those issues up front as we respond. Depending on those situations, if they are alone and we know that they are armed, we usually will try to call them on the phone, kind of like a negotiator, and just kind of try to de-escalate them, let them know that we're here to help them and support them, and try to gain compliance. If we are unable to gain compliance, then we have to assess whether or not, if the risk of making entry is worth it. So are they only a threat to themselves? There's no one else in the home. It may be better to de-escalate the situation by not making forced entry into the home and escalating into potentially an officer-involved shooting. So we may just back off.
Wait it out.
And then just follow up maybe after they've stopped using and they've been able to get some sleep and kind of restart their brain over, so then we can reassess the situation on what their needs are.
Now, if you do establish phone contact, generally people who watch police dramas on TV see this happening. Are you the person on the other side of the phone trying to de-escalate it?
If it's mental health, yes. I usually am. A lot of the people in my city, Mill Creek, they know who I am. I've been doing the mental health for 4 years. So they know who I am, and I've been able to build a rapport with them. So a lot of times I can gain compliance. There's other times, as you know, people that are in a drug-induced psychosis, there's very little to no negotiating. So sometimes it's just a matter of just listening to what their concerns are and finding out what their immediate need is. If they want to be left alone and there's no other threat, we will likely do that. And if no crime's been committed, then yeah, we'll just leave them alone. And then I usually will let them know, I'll just follow up with you and we can reassess what's going on and what your needs are.
A lot of people, there is some negativity toward police officers still out there in society. And a lot of people don't really realize that the last thing a police officer wants to do is shoot and kill somebody, right?
That is true.
What kind of mental effect does that have on the officer when that happens?
So when an officer is involved in a critical incident, we are human just like anybody else, so our brain processes that information the same way as anyone else. So, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of, guilt. Did I do the right thing? Could I have done something differently? Lack of sleep. Replaying the situation over and over again, and how can I do it? How could I have done it differently? So that's why it's important also for an officer's mental health is, that they also, they seek therapy during that time when they're off on administrative leave. We encourage them to continue that rapport with a therapist, be able to talk to family and process what happened.
Are you involved in that with the officers, or is that some other therapist?
That is another therapist. Okay. So that would be probably one of our contracted therapists that we use.
How many mental health calls do you get, like in a week?
Good question.
So in Mill Creek, it depends. A lot of it also kind of depends on the time of year.
Yeah.
So on average, I would say probably in my regular 40-hour week, I probably go on anywhere between 10 and 20 a week.
You're kidding.
But I do follow-up.
Yeah.
That's what I do. The majority of my time is the follow-up of going out and reaching out to people and just make sure they're okay. And do they need resources? Sometimes I'm just the listening board. Just what's going on in their life. I may be their only support system that they have.
What's the ratio, do you think, between drug-induced psychosis and people that actually have psychosis?
I would say out of probably the close to 500 people that I oversee in Mill Creek City, I would say probably maybe 10% probably have some kind of substance use history.
Okay.
And the rest, and the other 90 is just a basic mental illness.
Correct.
Right. Huh. You've had a long career. We were talking about that earlier. You said for people who are watching, this is, how long?
28 years.
Okay. And when you started, when you started, what was your pay scale?
When I started in 1996, I started out at $12.77 an hour.
I wonder what McDonald's was paying back then. Probably $8 or $9. I don't know. I'd say, well, boy, risking your life for $12 an hour. What made you want to get into it?
Well, my story is kind of bizarre. It was not on my plan. I wanted to be a biologist. I just happened to be, it was a Christmas Eve. I was watching Cops, of all things. And I watched this female officer chase down a suspect, and I said, I can do that. And here I am.
Wow. And you've stayed. And what made you want to focus on the mental health aspect of policing?
So I got into mental health because we were starting just to see an increase of law enforcement taking their own lives. And some of those people I knew. within the Sheriff's Office and Unified Police Department. So I really struggled with that. It's like, what could we have seen? What could we have done differently to have helped them? So that encouraged me to go and get my degree. And so I graduated with my master's degree in social work in 2023. And I learned a lot, obviously, through education. And then I just have a passion for mental health. I mean, the brain is a very complex organ. And
That
it's,
nobody's totally figured out.
yeah, nobody's figured out. And I don't think I ever will. But it's very fascinating what the brain does when someone's under the influence of alcohol and drugs, or just having a mental disorder like schizophrenia, where people are having auditory and visual hallucinations. So it's very fascinating to me, and that's why I got into it.
I think looking back over your work, especially in the mental health field, can you think of what the worst situation was you were involved in, and the most rewarding, the best?
I would say the best, and I've got a few. There are a few clients I've actually have worked with for years, for several years. And it's taken a long time to build that relationship and to see them thrive. And there was one young kid. He's a paraplegic, and it's amazing to see that he's gone to the hospital and dealt with his health issues, but he's been dealing with his mental health, and he's thriving in the community, which is amazing to me. And I have a lot of those clients that are actively involved in the community. And then there are the ones that break your heart, that you've tried everything that you can, and they've taken their own life, and those are the hardest.
We deal with that as well. I think it's safe to say we get closer to some of our clients, and you think they've succeeded with sobriety and recovery, and then you hear that they died of an overdose. Mm-hmm. And that's hard to do. You've had that in the period you've been here, haven't you?
Yep. It's just wild. It's wild to work with them and see them grow and do really well, and they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
When you go out on a call, do you wear a uniform or not?
I do. I wear a uniform.
Because I've heard some police agencies, when they utilize an expert like you, say it's better to de-escalate a situation without a uniform.
Yes and no. I guess there are times I have gone out more in a lower level uniform, which we call like a Class C, which is just like a BDU and a polo shirt, where it's less intimidating. There are times I will wear my Class B, which is my full blue uniform. And a lot of that, I guess, is just habit of wearing my uniform and having all my gear and my vest. Even though I'm going in to de-escalate a situation, you never know if it's going to change. So I do want to be prepared that I have my vest and I have my tools, that if I do have to take any kind of action towards an individual, I am still prepared to do that.
How many times are you going face-to-face versus on the phone?
I would say probably 95% of the time I am going face-to-face. I go to their home. Okay. I'd like to meet their families. I'd like to meet who their support system is. So a lot of times I think it's more personal when you're sitting down with somebody face-to-face than just over the phone. The ones I talk to over the phone are probably the most volatile mental health clients that I have, that are potentially could be that threat. And so I don't want to escalate it. So sometimes just talking on the phone is beneficial for them, and they don't feel intimidated or threatened by law enforcement.
Do you find that there's...
Go ahead.
Do you find that there's, like for us with our mental health clients, the follow-up is the most important, the seeing who their support system is and all the resources out there, and there's just not that many. Do you find that as well?
I've actually been able to find a lot of resources. And I think the benefit when I go out is I'm free. So if they just want somebody to talk to, that's at no expense to them. They don't need, if they want to go to therapy, they can go to therapy. But if they just want to get stuff off their chest, They can talk about it. If they need, food resources, I will locate food resources for them. Sometimes I've even paid out of my pocket just to make sure that, that they are receiving some kind of food. I've transported individuals to their doctor's appointments or their therapy appointments just because they don't have access to transportation. So I try to do as much as I can, and sometimes that's enough for some of them.
They're super lucky to have you.
I was going to say the same thing. You can understand why she was named, Police Officer of the Year, because
That's awesome.
it sounds like you actually establish, you mentioned that you have like 500 people. Are those people just in Mill Creek that who are generally dealing with issues like this?
Yes, I do have a small population that are homeless, but they're homeless that frequent Mill Creek City. So I do keep track of them as best as I can. If they have a phone number, I'll check on them. If there's any transient problems or homeless problems in Mill Creek City, I respond because they may be someone that I've dealt with, and still try to kind of give them that direction to get access to resources.
So they look upon you as a friend a lot of the time, I would think.
I would hope. Yeah.
Are they amazed that you're a genuine, caring police officer? Okay.
Yes.
Are they surprised by that?
I think so. I think the reason why it's important that law enforcement is involved in this is to build those relationships. So when somebody is in crisis or a family has a family member in crisis, they're not afraid to call the police. So I think building that relationship is important. And I have a lot of them that always call me. They're like, hey, I'm just checking in, or hey, I've had this problem, with my family member or my child. Do you mind stopping by? Things have changed. And so it is helpful, and it takes it away from the general patrol calls. And building that relationship is also important. And, it's a good, I think it represents law enforcement well.
In my years, because I worked as a reporter for a long time, and I did that for over 40 years, in my observation is that police departments like yours have become much more progressive in terms of dealing with mental health or substance use issues than they used to be. Would you?
Absolutely. Back in the day, all we did was
When you were making 12 bucks.
when I was making 12 bucks, yeah, we that's all we did is we chased the criminals. And we have progressed as mental health is becoming less stigmatized. Legislation has gotten on board that law enforcement has to have X amount of hours per year of mental health training. And I have to say is we have a lot of really good officers with our department that even though they don't do mental health full time, they kind of slow down and they really pay attention to what the needs are. And I get a lot of compliments on our officers about, how they were treated with, an autistic child or a combative child or a suicidal. They appreciate the fact that we took the time, we showed compassion, and I think that's extremely important. So law enforcement has come a long way when we deal with mental health.
One of my AA meetings, we had an old retired Irish New York City cop, and he would sit there and tell us stories when he was sharing his drunken days, because he was drunk when he was on the job all the time, and how when he was patrolling New York City streets, if they came across somebody who was drunk or was screwed up in some way, they just pull out their billy club and just beat the crap out of them, and that's how they dealt with it.
Seems effective.
Huh?
I said seems effective.
Well, I guess maybe it diffused the situation at the time, but I mean, you think you've got all that way from, and that was something that you see in old-time movies and everything, and I'm sure that's the way it was years and years and years and years ago.
Yeah.
And you work for a pretty progressive department. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, absolutely.
And one thing I read about you in this award that you got is that you work with other officers in UPD in other precincts other than just Mill Creek to work with them on dealing with mental health issues.
Yes. even though I am assigned to Mill Creek, I do get officers that reach out to me from the other precincts. So if they have some difficult cases or chronic cases where they're getting called all the time, they'll reach out to me, and then I will go out and I will follow up with those people. UPD is in a transition with mental health. So we just hired a social worker, which will start at the end of January, which will be our first social worker with the police department. And so we're going to rebuild the mental health unit and what that looks like for UPD. So we're hoping that we'll see some good changes coming in the next year or so.
And more police departments are doing this. Like Salt Lake City Police hired one of our executives who is a licensed clinical social worker to work in their department, and they have a whole department now of social workers, which makes a lot of sense, right?
Yes.
Because you don't always need just a hardcore police officer on the street dealing with some of the situations you deal with.
Right.
So who makes the determination to call you? I mean, okay, obviously, if there's some incident going on, a patrol officer goes first. When did they determine that they need you?
So if I'm on duty and I hear a call that I believe may have that mental health component, just kind of depending on how that call comes out, if something just doesn't seem like a normal call, I'll just respond and I'll just kind of assess it. If it's a known person, they'll call me. And our officers are really good at determining whether or not there's a mental health component. So if I am not available, we have codes when we do our report writing. So when that code is attached to the report, those will automatically come to me. And then I can assess whether or not it's a mental health situation. And if so, then at least I just follow up and see what their needs are.
How do you deal with, because we run into this occasionally where somebody is court ordered to come into our treatment program and doesn't want to, but they do it so that it's either jail time or coming into a program. How do you deal with somebody who doesn't want any help but needs it?
Everybody has the right to self-determination.
Sure.
So even though they may say, no, I don't want anything to do with you, I don't want help, I don't need help, I don't want resources, I will usually check back. I give it 30 days, and then I check back. Hey, I'm just checking in on you. So I'm kind of a little persistent. And I think when they know somebody cares, then maybe they may see, oh, well, someone actually cares about me and what I do. So maybe I should take that step and get help and get treatment.
You're earning their trust.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love the way you are able to look at how things have changed over the years because you've been around for a while. Would you say that in society, just in general, that problems are worse now with mental health issues and substance use, or is it just that we recognize it more?
I think a little bit of both. States across the country, which has been going on since the 70s, is closing down state hospitals.
Right. That was during the Reagan administration.
Yes.
Yeah.
So nobody did anything for those people. Nobody helped them navigate being back in the community. So they became part of our homeless population, started using substances to cope. And now that transition from a state hospital, they'll usually go into a boarding home or somebody where they can connect with other individuals that have similar situations, and they have that support, they have that stability of shelter and access to resources. And I think back then when we looked at substances, it was criminal. So we took substances, it's like, okay, well, you're a substance user, we're going to put you in jail. You're a substance user, we're going to put you in jail. Instead of kind of digging into the deeper rooted issues which caused them to use the substances in the first place. So I think it's a combination of those.
Are substances, because it changes. I mean, I was in college during the late 60s, and everybody was smoking pot and dropping LSD. And now we've got all these things that are killing people, like fentanyl and things like that. Has the drug situation gotten worse because of the nature of substances?
Absolutely. I worked the DEA Metro Narcotics Task Force back in 2000 to 2003, where meth, when the drugs were tested, they were only like 20, 30% pure drug. When the cartels saw that we were dipping into their proceeds, they started manufacturing and cleaning up the drugs. So now they're 90+% pure drug. And then now everything is being cut with fentanyl. So, you're dealing with an amphetamine and you're dealing with an opiate. And so it's just making things worse. And I think the substances that they're using are making them more volatile, where they become more dangerous to themselves, to the family, and to the community.
And I think everybody recognizes that you can't arrest your way out of substance abuse. So what is and we hear the presidential candidates talking about, okay, we got to crack down at the border, got to stop the drugs from coming in. And it's sort of been my opinion that as long as there's a demand, somebody's going to supply that demand.
Absolutely.
What do you think the ultimate solution is to all this? I know you could run for president or whatever, but that's a tough question. But what is the?
Oh, it is a tough question, and I probably should not say what my answer would be.
Well, I mean, what do you think's more important, treatment or law enforcement cracking down?
I think it's both. If we can minimize what's actually getting into the country, will help. So if that supply is not available, then we can help those that do have a substance use issue and encourage them to get into the treatment and be productive instead of the amount of drugs that are coming into this country. And I think legalization, I don't think that's a good decision. So like marijuana, ketamine, hallucinogenics, I don't think, that's just personal opinion, but I just don't think that that's beneficial to anyone when you're legalizing it. Again, it all depends on where you're getting it and who's controlling it.
I'm trying to figure out what you just said, whether it's better to make everything illegal or what, and because you don't support any legalization then.
No, I do not.
And we should tell, this is her personal opinion, not speaking on behalf of UPD, right?
Yeah, that's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've seen, marijuana use back then and marijuana use now is very different. Like I said, it's being cut with fentanyl. And I think now that it's legalized, people misuse it. And there's an increase in DUIs. And then there's a lot of poor decision making being made because they're using marijuana more consistently. And so I don't agree with it being legalized.
And it's so much stronger
Absolutely.
than it used to be. I mean, I first smoked marijuana when I went to college, and I had to smoke 3 joints before I even felt any kind of buzz in my head. Mm-hmm. And now, if I were to do that, which I'm not, okay, but the last time I did was years ago, and maybe 2 or 3 puffs got me really high. Yeah. So that's the big difference. Thank you for coming on and sharing how you deal with what is a real serious problem in society. And you deserve the honor of being UPD Officer of the Year. I know you're modest and probably don't think that you should, but you're proud of it, aren't you?
I am proud of it, yes.
Yeah, well, thank you for all you do. And this is one of the most watched and listened to podcasts dealing with addiction and recovery. And what you do is certainly one major aspect in dealing with that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you inviting me.
Thank you for being here. Good to see you again, Nicole.
You too.
All right. And thank you for watching another edition of Odyssey House Journals.